Hi there, everybody. Hello, and thank you for joining me. So, as there's so much going on at the moment in this particular story, in this fictional novel, we're getting to the real sort of meat of the story. I felt it was about time that I came on and started to talk to you a bit more about the novel and the characters and analyze things for you. So I will just move my face out of the way so it doesn't distract me. And we'll get straight into it. So I wanted to talk first of all about a few dreams I have had. Just nothing specifically huge, but enough to mention. And then I'm going to go through some posts I've been making on my social media sites in response to people's questions regarding the story specifically of our character, Mr. Tea Tree. Okay, so July 17th. So this is coming up 4 months ago now, actually. This was July 17th. So in this dream, and it was one of those moments where I was in a normal dream, and then all of a sudden I'm no longer viewing the dream as if I am a different character or interacting in that dream. It was like I was me watching a film, watching a screen in front of me. So that dream had moved into a higher presentation of lucidity. And instantly I saw this image and had this feeling come with it. So in this dream, what I saw, and I think I have talked about this already, I think either in one of the story videos or possibly in an interview that I did with, I think, Laura Eisenhower and Rising Phoenix Aurora, that can be found over on Rumble. I think I may have mentioned this here. So what I actually saw was Mr. Tea Tree, Mr. Tea Tree's face, but not just his face, him walking around, his face, all sorts of different days, all being played out on hundreds and hundreds of television screens, all over the media, the world's media spotlight was on Mr. Tea Tree. Every single channel, every country, every domain in the village, they were all showing images and talking about Mr. Tea Tree. And it was massive. It was just worldwide. It was totally global. And I thought, wow, because this is July 17th and he hadn't been particularly much of a central character in the novel for probably a couple of years. There's a motorbike outside making a really loud noise, so I'll let that die down till I carry on speaking. Okay. Yeah, I mean, Mr. Tea Tree. What's going on out there? Significance of a motorbike in the middle of me speaking about Mr. Tea Tree, anyone? Because I don't know about that. Maybe just coincidence. There is no such thing, of course. Coincidences are nearly always meaningful. I'll have to ponder on that. Anyway, yeah, I mean, Mr. Tea Tree. I might have to cut this. Someone is just sitting outside my house on a motorbike. Interesting. Anyway, can't read things into everything. Mr. Tea Tree had taken very much of a deliberate I think he's gone. Leave it. Mr. Tea Tree had taken somewhat of a deliberate step back from the media spotlight, from the media glare, for specific reasons and for several specific reasons, all part of this genius strategizing that this particular gnome in the story has the ability to do. Strategy and planning and seeing the patterns of concepts. And if you were to liken that to a chess game, then Mr. Tea Tree the gnome would be a master chess player, because what he would be able to do would be to see sort of 7, 8 moves ahead of his opponent. So this is how everything is played with this particular gnome. So this backward step out of the media glare is strategic, very much so. It's not, people perceive this as being abandoned. Mr. Tea Tree the gnome just doesn't want to know. Off he goes. He's not involved. He's not interested. No. It's never, ever been like that. No, this was a planned, strategic step back, all meant to be. So when I had this dream July 17th, I was like, wow, Mr. Tea Tree's coming back into the spotlight, coming back in front of the cameras globally. And then I thought, well, is this a good thing or a bad thing? You know, is this positive or negative? And I could feel this surge of emotion, high emotion. But the emotional field that went with this picture was so muddled, not muddled in a way that I couldn't sense it, because I did sense it really clearly. What I mean by that is so many different emotions all at once. That's what I mean. There was euphoria, there was happiness, there was anger, and there was shock. I mean, a lot of shock. And there was also a lot of darkness as well, like almost like it more than anger. I'm trying to think. That motorbike is still out there, so distracting. One of the dark forces have sent their dark motorbike riders in to distract me from telling you this story. I think he's gone. Oh goodness. Yeah, this emotion, there was kind of, I'm trying to name it because it was different to anger. It was more like, we will bring you down. It was more like a direct psychic attack, if you will. So there was euphoria, there was joy, there was love, there was happiness. So people were looking at this Mr. Tea Tree all across the world stage with real happiness and joy and celebration. And then there was this, we will bring you down, psychic attack, real darkness. There was anger, hatred, and shock. I thought, what on earth is this? So I asked the 9, I said, is this a negative or positive thing? They said both. So I haven't known what this is this whole time. And this was July 17th. So I didn't actually think it would be Mr. Tea Tree announcing that he was running for a top banana competition position. That actually didn't enter my head. I wondered if Mr. Tea Tree was going to be caught by some of the law enforcement gnomes and elves in the village. That was one of my thoughts, but all this euphoria and happiness didn't kind of make sense. So I'm trying to analyze what it could be. And I thought, well, he does something. He's going to do something that's going to create the entire global media to be looking at him. And it has all this mix of emotion. I don't know what that something is. So that is July 17th dream. What I wrote on my social media was short and sweet, and lots of people commented. In my dream, I saw Mr. Tea Tree. Suddenly there was a surge of energy all around him. So that was all the emotion, which I instinctively knew signified exposure. So it was like he was in this hidden place, a strategic move away from the spotlight, and all of a sudden the surge, here I am in front of the world's stage. Here I am. And that was a strategic move as well. I instinctively knew signified exposure, as in all eyes on Mr. Tea Tree. The world's media were all reporting on him. He was in every headline, on every broadcast. Why, I do not know. I only saw the surge of energy that I knew meant global exposure, but I do not know the reason for it at this point. Now, I'm trying to work out, obviously, we're now, you know, that was July. Yeah, we're four months, 4 months down the line from that. So Mr. Tea Tree has actually been out in front of the world's stage. Is that it? I'm trying to work out if the actual event of Mr. Tea Tree speaking on the village podium on the 16th of November matches that particular dream, to see if that's what I saw. And it is very, very similar, very similar. But in the dream, it seemed more of a shock. More people were shocked. And it seemed as though it was a larger exposure than the actual talking on the podium in the village. So I don't know, is this something still yet to come? I mean, could it be that I saw an actual top banana competition win? Is that what I saw in that dream? I'm not sure. So I'm putting it out there to say this is what I saw. It could be what already took place on the 16th of November, as in the or was that the 15th of November, when the tea tree gnome got up on the podium and spoke. It could have been that. It could have been that. So I would know that Mr. Tea Tree was coming back into the media spotlight. It could have been that, but it did seem slightly bigger and larger in the dream. However, dreams are often exaggerated versions of the real thing. So it could absolutely be that. So I'm just going to hold space for that at the moment and see what plays out, and see if this is actually something else yet to come, or was that it that has already occurred at Mr. Tea Tree the Gnome's hut, which is called Lara Margarana, and it's a beautiful place. And that's where Mr. Tea Tree the Gnome had this beautiful podium put up, and invited a lot of the media gnomes and elves and fairies to come and listen to him. So that was the 17th of July. Okay, next one. I posted this on I posted this also around at a similar time, maybe slightly afterwards. It was a little bit afterwards, and I wrote here, I get intel through dreams that come way ahead of time. I didn't realize that at first, but then I've worked out over time that whenever I get intel through dreams, I always think, oh, this is so imminent. It's going to be next week. It's tomorrow. It's like next month. And often I think, well, it might be 6 months, but often it's a year or longer. So this is why I'm not sure about the July 17th dream, because this was the world's media. So if the world's media, the entire global world's media, was looking at Mr. Tea Tree when he was speaking at his home, and in all these different emotions, including shock, big, 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 then yeah, it fits. But it doesn't seem to have been such a huge thing as it was in the dream. Anyway, I wrote, I get intel through dreams that come way ahead of time. Now, it was just after the competition, the last competition, when I asked what was going on. I asked the 9 to talk about the novel, what's going on in this novel, what's happening in this fictional story. And that's when I dreamt the entire play out. And when I say the entire play out, I'm not talking about the competition. I'm talking about the taking down of the overlord structure within the village, the actual full takedown of that entire structure at all levels, and then the moving into Freedom Earth, Freedom Gaia, Ascension, 5D on Earth, all those things, New Earth. That's what I saw. Now, this particular dream was much more lucid. It was much more lucid than the July 17th dream. This was, I don't know, if you had a camera lens, which is gives you clarity, I don't know, 5 times, as if you weren't, 5 times more than a normal television image from the 80s, let's say. This was like 100 times more vivid than an original TV image from the 80s. This is massively lucid, this particular dream. And I dreamt the whole play out from now, which was just after the last competition, 2020, through to the end and the takedown of the entire structure. I don't know how long that takes. Is this a few months? Is this a few years? Is this many years? I haven't been given time markers because so much is happening all at the same time, and this isn't about linear time, as I'll talk about later. I'm just going to check we're still recording here. Yes, we are. So the play out, that the most significant piece, or that's not the right word, the most significant tool for this play out, the most significant platform or core piece of equipment, core technology for this play out was, believe it or not, social media. It was done through social media. I mean, I still can't get my head around that. How can social media be the thing that takes down this dark structure that's been in the village for thousands of years? But that's what it was. It was social media. And I'm sure that many of you listening probably can see how that would be. But for me, it was a surprise, because what I thought I would see is people going into places and doing things and moving this and moving that. And I'm sure that they are. But the core point of it, the core tool to this, is social media. So this was long before the social media in the village that's called Let's All Tell the Truth game. Long before that came about, this dream, there was a social media site started by the gnome, Mr. Tea Tree. He started his own social media site, and in the beginning, it's just like small. It's just nothing, just like any normal social media site, like, you know, the other ones. It's no different. It's just a new one. Nothing different about it. But then it starts to get bigger. It starts to get bigger, and then it's linked to the competition, and it's linked to the law and the legalities, and it's linked to sovereignty. It's linked to original law. It's linked to many domains. It's linked to finance. This social media site starts being linked through the social media web to all of these different systems. And it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, in the run-up to this social media site getting bigger and bigger and bigger, in this particular urban fantasy fiction novel, in the run-up to that, there are huge attacks. I don't know if that's actually started yet in the novel page that we're reading, but this is what I saw in this particular very lucid dream, very psychic, clairvoyant, precognitive dream. There were attacks because the overlords realized, oh my goodness, this is getting too big. Started off small. And then attacks started, and loads of controversy, trying to make out that it's just like the worst possible site that you could go on. And then what I saw were all these threads coming from this one social media. The social media site becomes like a company, a corporation, a business, a huge structure. It just goes on, and it goes into so many different places. And I don't know if this is behind the scenes or in front of everything. I think it's a bit of both. But eventually, everything is, the word is, gosh, what word am I looking for? When someone's racing for something and someone puts a roadblock in front of them and they trip up, like curtail them, stop them running. That's the image I was seeing. And that happens to all of them. Every dark structure, wherever it is tripped up. I can't think of a word to explain that. Curtailed, emasculated, cut off, shut down. That's, you get the gist. That was happening to all of them. I don't remember clearly exactly how it plays out, other than I saw these threads coming from this social media site into this world. It's almost like it's a new world wide web of its own within this particular urban fantasy fiction, science fiction novel, like a technology, like a quantum technology. It's hard for me to explain what I'm seeing, because at first it's just the social media site. There's loads and loads going on. I mean, I think it possibly involves things like the markets. Don't ask me what that means. I don't know. The Nine have told me so many times about the markets and how important they are. And I believe they're referring to financial markets. Then there's stocks and shares and bonds. And then there's crypto, and it's all in there. And I haven't got a clue. I just do not understand this stuff. I'm useless with finance and mathematics. But that's why this is an urban science fiction novel as well as a fantasy fiction novel. All of this is tied up with this company that spreads out, and it's almost like, although Mr. Tea Tree the gnome started it, it's his company. He's not necessarily standing there like having his finger in every single pie that's going on. That's not what happens. It's the people. The people create their own little domain within this social media system, and they become the leader of their own domain. And then they're trading or talking to, or whatever it is they're doing with all of these other little pixies and gnomes and elves, and they're all talking together, and they're all masters of their own domain, and they're all corporation leaders, and they're all top bananas. I know that this is kind of down the line, but it was such a significant dream. I'm going to read to you what I wrote. So I get intel through dreams that come way ahead of time. It was just after the first competition when I asked the Nine what is going on, after, you know, Mr. Tea Tree did not appear to get the top banana position. I basically dreamt the entire play out. It was all done through social media. A site started by Mr. Tea Tree starts off small and gets huge attacks, huge controversy, etc., etc. But wow, what happens is phenomenal. And seeing it all play out in one like fast forward image. And I knew when I woke up, I saw the whole takedown. And my first thought was, so that's how they do it. That was my first thought. As soon as I opened my eyes, so that's how they do it. I wondered, how can it possibly be done? And so that's how they do it. And I said to Cat's Magic, my husband, I know how they're going to do it. I know how they're going to take the structure down. I dreamt the whole thing. So yeah, this is how I know. I remember waking up the next morning with my mind blown, literally. It was so clear. And I thought to myself, so that's how they do it. So I'm not on the fence because I don't need to be. Now, I think that's in response to someone else saying, why aren't I on the fence about something? So that's kind of irrelevant because I haven't got that particular question with me. But I shared my knowings with others. And if it aligns with their resonance, then they have knowing too. Because this knowing of our future is within everybody as a memory structure, because memory moves backwards and forwards. So we have memory from the perspective of the aspect of us that's already lived this life. We can live this life, then leave the physical body and not be in this life anymore, and look back at our life review through our memory and see everything that happened. We can actually go from now before we're anywhere near the end of our lifetime, we can go to the aspect of us that has ended this lifetime and look back and remember everything that happened. That's what these dreams are. This is what I mean by precognitive, clairvoyant, psychic, lucid dreams, astral projection, whatever name you want to give it, out of body experience, etc., activation of the pineal gland. It's remembering the lifetime. We all know it. Every single one of us know it. You just have to ask with a pure heart to be seen. If you want to know, with no agenda, no desire to use that knowing in any way, and I mean any way. You don't use that knowing to hurt others. You don't use that knowing to get one up on others. You don't use that knowing to be intelligent or better than other people. You don't use that knowing to get famous. You don't use that knowing to be the best psychic ever. You don't use that knowing to write a book. You don't use that knowing to make money. There's no agenda other than the pure asking, simply because you want to know. You want to know because you want the information there as a puzzle piece to put together. So I was very happy that I was shown the whole thing. So I shared my knowings with others. And if it aligns with their resonance, then they have knowing too. However, if you don't have that, then of course you would be right to sit on the fence and proceed with caution. So someone had obviously said, I'm going to sit on the fence and proceed with caution. That's a good thing to do. It's good to be on the fence and look at the left side of the fence, the right side of the fence, proceed with caution, as in I'm not going to get caught up in this, caught up in that. So whoever asked me that question or made that statement, very, very sensible. We're all at different places in this, and that's how it works. I hope you perhaps understand where I'm coming from. So what I'm saying here is, I'm not on the fence on this because I saw it. I have access to my memory, but that's only for me. It's only for me as Magenta. I'm sharing it with you because it's so tied up with everything that's going on in the novel. It's tied up with the chapters that have yet to be written in this story. It's tied up with the characters. It's tied up with one of the main characters in the story, which is Mr. Tea Tree, the gnome. It's tied up with all this. So I share my insights for you to then choose as a puzzle piece. But my insight won't be one of the main puzzle pieces for you. It will be, okay, that's Magenta's puzzle piece. I'm going to, hold that there as a potential. And I'm going to hold that alongside all these other puzzle pieces. And then I'm going to go within and find out my own answer to this question, what's going on. I'm going to discover my own puzzle piece. I'm going to create my own jigsaw. That's why I'm sharing. So we're all at different places in this. That's how it works. I hope that perhaps helps you understand where I'm coming from. If you've followed my work, then you may have already seen the video. So I asked the 9 to talk about this dream, to bring forward in a transmission what's the whole concept of this dream, this whole takedown from beginning to end. And the 9 did come forward, and I did bring forward a transmission, and that video is called Tea Tree as New Media Progenitor, Humanity's Collective Destiny. So I've shared this quite a lot repeatedly on my social media whenever questions like this come up. I would urge you to have a look again if you want to see what this actually is that I'm talking about. Tea Tree as New Media Progenitor, because that's what he was in that position. This particular gnome was the progenitor of this new media system that was tied up to the system itself. How, I don't know. I don't understand the quantums and the computers and the tech and that side of it. There are warriors out there that will, and they'll have another piece of the puzzle to put into that. So go see that video, Tea Tree as New Media Progenitor, Humanity's Collective Destiny. And I think perhaps at some point I should take that transmission and do an analysis of that itself, because some people don't necessarily respond to the transmissions from the 9. They prefer to listen to me analyzing everything, and other people vice versa. They much prefer the transmissions, which is why I do both. Okay, next dream. Wow, this was a strange one. So very short and sweet. It was the 31st of October, so Halloween. And in my dream, Samhain, of course, in my dream, I met a tall man. He was literally just stood in front of me. There was other stuff going on in the dream, and all of a sudden I was drawn to this man just staring at me, and it's almost like he didn't belong in the dream. He'd been inserted into the dream. Have you ever had dreams where normal dream stuff's going on, all of a sudden there's something there that stands out, like it's not part of the rest of the dream, like it just popped into the dream and it was something different, something more real, something that holds far more substance than all these images playing out? That's exactly how it was. This man looked very similar to, I won't say exactly the same, I won't say identical, very similar to the actor that plays the giant in Twin Peaks. I think he's also been in Star Trek. I think he's also been in The Addams Family. This is this tall actor. It looked so similar to him. And he just looked at me right in my eyes and he said, Tuesday. And then he was gone. Tuesday. That was it. The message. I'm like, oh my goodness. So when I woke up, I was like, is that for me personally? Is that something to do with my life? Is that something to do with my family? Is it something global? This was Halloween, the 31st of October. So I wrote on my social media, I met a tall man in my dream who just looked at me and said, Tuesday. I honestly have no idea what this means, but seeing as it's Tuesday tomorrow, I thought I would share, because that was Monday morning. So the dream was Sunday night early into Monday morning. He looked very much like the actor who plays the giant in Twin Peaks. So lots of people spoke in my social media and were giving me potential ideas and talking amongst themselves as to what the Tuesday could mean. Nothing particularly happened on Tuesday, really, that I can think of, not in my personal life or globally that I'm aware of. The following Tuesday was the 8th, which was a huge total lunar eclipse, and it was also the day that the fairies and all the elementals go out into the village and they pick up a big drum or a you know, like some kind of stick that they've made and bang the drum, and the patterns they make when they bang the drum is their if you will, box ticking regarding the competition. This isn't the competition for top banana. This is competition for the smaller bunches of bananas that hang on the banana tree that are not actually top bananas. So that was the 8th. So I thought, right, is it something to do with that? Okay. And other people felt that it was. But then, of course, Mr. Tea Tree made an announcement that he was going to be talking, and I'm pretty sure that was also Tuesday, the 15th. Yeah. So that was Tuesday too. So what did this guy mean when he said Tuesday? I don't know, but nothing much happened on the first Tuesday. So there's the lunar eclipse and the beating of the drums. Let's just call that box ticking. There's box ticking for the competition for the smaller bananas. And then the following week was Mr. Tea Tree's address to the village, standing on the podium. So there was something prominent there to take note of, I feel, which is why I was told Tuesday. That's what I feel it is. Sometimes it takes a while to work out what these things mean, but I'm thinking it's the two tied up together, the two Tuesdays involved. Okay, so on the night of November the 15th, so this was the night before. I'm sure this was the night before the day that Mr. Tea Tree gave his address to the village. It was the night before. I was told, so this was being spoken to in the dream, didn't particularly see anything. I'm being talked to by this higher dimensional energetic voice that I know as the Nine, or sometimes emanations of the Nine. So it's almost like a merging between my own mind, my own subconscious mind, my own thoughts that come to the fore when I'm asleep, and the Nine simultaneously. So I was told in my dream the most crucial, significant and important aspect of the middle term competition. So that's what the village competition is called, the one for the smaller bananas. That's the middle term competition, is in the domain known as the Aria zones. The Aria zones. That is the most significant and important aspect for this particular competition. It's the Aria zones. All the others are very important, but that's where the focus is. Because this particular part of the competition, because you've got all these tiny little zones within the bigger zone that is the Americano domain, also known as USville. You've got all these smaller, I think there's 50 of these little smaller domains, and one of them is the Aria zones. And this is the core zone for this particular competition. And the reason being is it holds an inevitability. So it's like a mini singularity. What that means is that every timeline all has the same outcome in that particular structure, that particular aspect. So when you're looking at the entire competition across the whole of the USville Americano zone, domain, you're looking at all the 50 zones, and the Aria zones is the only one really that's got a play out that has the same outcome in every single timeline. So it's an inevitability, meaning no matter what happens, the play out is the same. And the play out is eventually, and there's lots of different ways of getting there. That's why I'm saying it's an inevitability, it's a singularity, a mini singularity, a node point. There's lots of different ways to get to that inevitability, but the inevitability eventually, so some of the timelines are longer, some of them are shorter. We don't know which timeline is going to manifest in the actual village in the story, but the outcome is the same, and the outcome is exposure of the color changing squares. So if you remember, I've spoken earlier in the novel about Gloria Love in the hot tub, red squares all around her when she asked the question about, you know, who's going to succeed in the top banana position, and she was surrounded by red squares in the hot tub. And this was the night before the competition, and she sat back and thought, oh, great, this is wonderful. Mr. Tea Tree is taking that top banana position. How lovely. And all of a sudden, one square flipped to blue. And Gloria Love was like, what? What happened there? It was red. And then another one, and then another one, and then another one. And they all, bar a couple, flipped to blue. And Gloria Love was sat in the hot tub and thought, what's going on? How can this happen? What does this mean? And then it dawned on her, oh my goodness me. No, it had not dawned on Gloria Love in the novel until the night before the competition that could occur. Because what she'd always been seeing is Mr. Tea Tree being the top banana. The vision was as clear as day. She'd always seen it. She hadn't taken into account any eventuality of that not manifesting due to the red squares flipping to blue. That was a surprise that she was given, a shock, the day before, the night before the competition. Obviously, that was meant to be. She wasn't supposed to see that until then. So the next thing that happened, which was months and months and months later, is she, again in the hot tub, saw those squares flip back to red. But it was strange what happened. The red was not delivered. It wasn't delivered to the village, to all the quantum villages in the universal village structure in the novel. It wasn't delivered. The red squares flipped, but they were all bundled up into piles of squares, and then a white square was placed on top of each bundle. So you couldn't see what color. You couldn't see whether it was red or blue because there's a white square on top of it. And then each one was tied up with string and put away somewhere in a vault. So that remains to this day in the novel. The red squares have flipped back to red already. They already have done that, but they are not being delivered and they are put away somewhere safe with a white square on top and everything's tied up with string. So analyzing that, something's already happened, people haven't seen it yet, and it's waiting to be presented. So some kind of, and you know, I can't go too far into the novel because, you know, if somebody like an overlord were to get hold of the novel and read the novel themselves, or if an overlord were to listen to me talking about the novel, I would be giving that overlord spoilers. So what I'm going to say is my wild guess on what these bundles are is some kind of evidence or proof. That's my wild guess. It might not be. But the squares themselves, which are the beatings of the drums and the box ticking, each square is one box tick, one beat of the drum in this novel, piled up and kept, recorded with a white square on top. So people say to me, my drum beating doesn't count. What's the point of beating the drum and ticking the box? Because my box ticking and my drum beating doesn't count. And I'm saying to you, it 100% does, because it's been kept and it's been put away with all the others in a vault, in secret, kept, and it will be released. So please don't think that your drum beating does not count, because it does. So back to the Aria zones. This is the inevitability, the exposure of the color changing squares. So basically, these bundles of red squares with the white square on top are going to be taken out of the vault and thrown into the air, and everyone's going to see them. And it's all to do with the Aria zones. Now, there is a lady in the Aria zones who was going for the sort of mini top banana position there. Her name is Cariana Rivers, and she's also known as the Lady of the Lake. So she was in the mini top banana position. Now, what I was shown that actually happened here was exactly the same, really, as the whole sort of original hot tub situation, where there were just red squares everywhere, literally everywhere. I didn't actually have this vision. Gloria Love didn't have this vision. This was more a communication being shown more in a remote viewing kind of way, rather than, well, it's both remote viewing, but there's interpretation of information coming in. That's a vision. And then there's an actual vision that you see with the pineal gland as if you were there. So they're different. So this one was more about interpreting information coming in. So red squares everywhere that were again flipped to blue. So Cariana Rivers is the true mini top banana of the Aria zones. The other person is not. But this particular aspect of the banana position is the one that releases, this is what's so interesting, this is the one that releases the original red squares, which were from the top banana Mr. Tea Tree competition. So this leads to the exposure of the original red squares that were flipped, the ones in the vault with the white squares on top. Aria zones, that's why Aria zones is so significant. And no matter what happens, the play out is the same. So if Cariana Rivers had actually won, this would still happen. If Cariana Rivers had lost, this would still happen. It's in all of them, no matter what is done. It's an inevitability. It's a trajectory into a singularity. So the exposure of the red squares will occur, and it will be due to the Lady of the Lake in the Aria zones. That is my conclusion, given all of this information coming in from mediumship, clairvoyance, psychic ability, dreaming, and putting it all together, I am going to make that statement that that is what will happen. Okay, we're going to get into some questions now, which came in. This came in. A couple came in just prior to Mr. Tea Tree standing on the podium and giving a talk to the villagers, and then some of the questions come in after. So here's one of the questions. Dear Magenta, if Mr. Tea Tree was able to win his past competition, the original competition, why are the Dark Overlords continuing to have success with their ability to flip the squares in the USville competition? Didn't the Fae, who wear those little caps, those little white caps, they wear cute little white caps with white feathers in, so they're sort of, you know, white capped pixies. Didn't the Fae who wear those white caps, did they not play chess moves to secure Mr. Tea Tree's win? And if they were able to do that, why did they not play chess moves to secure the ruby wave? Were they just not able to, or are they intentionally letting the trickery happen to expose it? So, you know, really great questions here. And this is my reply. There was no trickery with Mr. Tea Tree's win, because the question is, if Mr. Tea Tree was able to win his past competition, why are the Dark Overlords continuing to have success with their trickery? So the question is, how are they having success in their square flipping when Mr. Tea Tree was able to win the original competition in the first place? We're talking about, I think, chapter 2016 in the book. So I can understand where this person's coming from, but the two do not relate together, because there was no trickery with Tea Tree's win from the side of the ruby. When you go over to the blue side, the blue sapphire, there was trickery there, but because of the ability, as I've said before, to look into the magic mirror, see potential playouts, see timelines, see the lady known as Hilarion winning, and that was actually seen within that technology, it was a done deal. It was the most probable timeline. And all of these other lower timelines were all showing Hilarion as the winner, as the top banana. So it was a done deal. So, you know, maybe a little bit of square flipping here and there. They didn't really, you know, little bit of square flipping for top banana, for Mr. Tea Tree, but they didn't need to do much because Hilarion is in the magic mirror in multiple timelines. What they didn't understand was the quantum nature of the reality itself, where a wild card can like flip at the last minute into the most probable timeline without any forewarning, especially when you're using technology, because when you start observing timelines start behaving very erratically. You know, anyway, so this is what I said. There was no trickery with Tea Tree's win from that perspective. That was not done through any kind of square flipping or anything one would see as dishonest or out of integrity. Nothing was there to match that. It was a wild card, which is the low probability. So it's hidden. It's hidden in the technology because it's too low to even be looked at. There's multiple timelines, multiple playouts. Anyone using technology to view timelines isn't going to look at all the ones that are so low on probability because they're highly unlikely to manifest. But they still can. Highly unlikely doesn't mean never. And that's the thing. That's the wild card. An unexpected move that was not seen in the magic mirror, prompting the Dark Overlords to ramp up the switching of the red squares to the blue squares in the future. So nothing unexpected could occur again. So what I'm saying here is they understood then about the wild card in the quantum structure, and they took measures to make sure that that wild card did not happen again. So top banana in the US-ville is the most important chess piece on the board. So if you're looking at the chessboard in the novel, and you're looking at the pixies playing chess, the chessboard representing the structure, the system in the village, the most important piece on the board is the top banana position in US-ville, in the Americano domain. Now, a lot of people don't understand that, because there are many domains. There are many powerful domains. You know, we've got Rashuia, we've got Chirano. They're big domains. You know, we've got big, important domains. The most important piece on the chessboard is the top banana position in the Americano domain. I don't quite know why. I can only tell you what the 9 have told me, which is what happens in the Americano domain will affect every domain across the entire village on a planetary and global level within the village structure. I think what I'm seeing is that the majority of the overlords are focused on that particular domain, the Americano domain, because of the high intelligence, the awareness, the freedoms, the legal structures, and yes, okay, the documentation known as constitution deliverance, which is a it was written by a pixie called Bill, and he wrote it in the right way on a piece of stone, and the pixies just call it constitution deliverance. That's what they call it. So that is tied up with everything, and it's tied up with laws and legalities that run through multiple streams. So, you know, the core point is there. There are other reasons as well. There's other reasons as well, and it's something to do with Mrs. Millie Terry, that lovely lady, and she marches a lot. There's lots of reasons, and I don't know them all, but the 9 have told me since literally day one, the most important chess piece on the board is the top banana position in US-ville in the Americano domain for the overlords to have. They can't implement the plan globally without that chess piece. It's so crucial to understand all this. If they do not have that chess piece, they cannot implement the plan. And the thing is, and this is what's so important to know, they don't have it. Although we have got Mr. Bebop, they do not have the top banana position. They need all of it. They need all of it, and they've only got a little bit of it. They've only got it in name only, if you will, because Mr. Tea Tree has kept something. There are 2 top bananas, as I've said before. One is not known to the people, but is understood in all that's righteous and all that's good and all that's real and all that's true. And the other is a false top banana that is the one presented to the people. So they don't have it, and they are desperately trying to get that piece. They can still do other things. They can still do other things in other domains, but they can't implement the global plan, which is the order of the world that is new. They can't implement it without this chess piece. Everything breaks without that chess piece. And I really can't say why it's so important, but it's the number 1 position. When they've got that secure with everything, all the bits and pieces that go with it, they don't have that because Mr. Tea Tree took the bits and pieces with him. So they're trying to get the bits and pieces back somehow. And Mr. Bebop is just a placeholder. Once they've got that secure, only then can everything else work. And it won't, because they will not get it. They will not get this. It's just not in the timeline for them to have what they want in that position. It's gone for them. It's too late. So these are really great questions here. So prompting the Dark Overlords to ramp up the switching of the red squares to the blue squares in the future, so nothing unexpected could occur again. No more wild cards. Okay. No more wild cards. Top banana in the Americano USville is the most important chess piece on the board. The chess moves the white-capped pixies used were not to secure a win, but a run. Okay, so that's talking about, obviously, the original part of the plan was to secure a win, but not this time, not the second time. That was just a run. It was just a run that they were trying to secure. So they did make chess moves to secure the run. I'm not explaining this very well. Okay, so chess moves were made by the pixies that wear the white caps. They were to secure the run, the actual run. They moved things around and assisted Mr. Tea Tree to get into position for the run. But they couldn't secure a win because they do not use that which is out of integrity or anything nefarious. So with the Sapphire Blue Alliance, they secure the win through a nefarious technological system and that which is out of integrity. So they can secure a win. But the white-capped pixies did not secure a win because they do not use nefarious technology. They could only secure the run. The win had to be genuine, actual, genuine red squares from the villagers, the Fae. And that's what happened. Okay, so I'm breaking down these multiple questions here. No one is letting the flipping of the squares happen just to expose it. It's not as if they're sitting back and thinking, well, let it all happen just so we can expose it, because they can't stop it from happening. So that's not the reason it's happening. The reason it's happening isn't because the white-capped pixies are sitting back and just letting it happen. They can't really stop it because the chessboard has equal power. As I've said so many times, we're going to see a 50-50 play out here. So we've got the sapphire blue, dark overlord structure within the novel, and we have the Ruby Alliance light structure also within the novel. That is not exactly as I'm presenting it, because, as I will add, some of the Ruby Alliance members are gnomes, and some of them are good gnomes like Mr. Tea Tree, and some of them are rhinoceros gnomes, a particular breed of gnome, rhinoceros gnomes. And those rhinoceros gnomes are really part of not the Sapphire Blue Alliance, but they're part of the Overlord structure. It's not really about Sapphire Blue or Ruby. It's not about Sapphire versus Ruby. It's about the Overlords and the Innocent Fae. That's the real picture. This red blue piece of tapestry in the middle of the village green is just a means to an end. It's not the real, that which is real behind it. So it's not as if the pixies with the white hats are sitting back and allowing it to happen. And the reason why it's happening is because they're sitting back, meaning if they didn't sit back and they went on in, they could stop it. They could stand there and say, right, we stop this now. They couldn't do that. But what they can do is other things through a strategy and a plan and things that can't be delivered exactly how they are because of an overlord possibly picking up the book and reading it, or listening to me talking about the story, or anyone talking about the story. So the actual plan that the white-capped pixies have, and that Mr. Tea Tree is mostly aware of as well, it's a work together thing, that can't be delivered in its entirety. Of course it can't. And sometimes that has to be delivered in multiple ways in order to not give anything away to the overlords. So that includes psychics and channels and storytellers, as well as people who are more directly connected to this situation in a different way. So they couldn't stop it logistically. However, sitting back and allowing it to play out is part of the strategy, because that's what will naturally expose it, simply because if they don't use it, if they don't use the square flipping, then the inevitability of the reveal of the true red square situation will never happen. So it's multiple stuff going on here. So you'll hear some people saying that the white cap pixies are sitting back and letting it happen. They are, but they couldn't stop it. They couldn't just go on in and stop it. That wouldn't be the way. That wouldn't be the way to do it. That's too direct. The strategizing is a movement that comes from multiple different angles and doesn't just go head on. Hey, you, I've seen what you're doing and I'm going to stop it, because there would be an instant rebuttal, as in, we're not doing that, prove it kind of thing. So that wouldn't be the way. So the white-hatted pixies are not letting it happen just to expose it. They can't do anything about it in a direct way, but allowing it to play out will naturally expose it, because it's like the sapphire blue team, or rather the overlord team, are falling into a trap. But who set the trap? I mean, there's a lot of talk about, oh, you know, bee stings, operations to remove bee stings and all that kind of thing. This is what's going on. That's true, but it's not the whole picture, because if you want to look at it from the overlord blue sapphire team's perspective, they've only got a certain amount of choices anyway, because they're trying to secure the most important position on the chessboard. They can't fulfill the rest of it without it. But they have got a fine line to play. That they haven't got all power. So when people say things like, oh, they've walked into a trap and they laid a trap, whilst that's true, they're also moving into their own strategy. So they don't see it as walking into a trap. They see it as setting their own field, if you will. They're setting out their own field. They don't see that as walking into a trap. This is not just about what the overlords are doing and what the white-capped pixies are doing. This goes multi-dimensional. This is about the dark, lower fourth dimensional network that goes into the extraterrestrial, artificial intelligence, science fiction aspect of the novel. And it's also about the higher dimensional, advanced extraterrestrial energies into the higher dimensional field, the angelic field, and into source. The whole thing is part of it. It's you know, when you look at what's happening just on the sort of competition level, the Ruby Alliance and the Sapphire Alliance level, that's just the bit in 3D in the Americano domain, and that's a main play out for the 3D domain. But you've got all these other domains as well. So it's It's a massive, massive picture. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because magic is used on both sides. So we've got the overlords have a magical ability with the moves they're making. It's a magical act to flip from red to blue with the squares. And the white-hatted pixies and Mr. Tea Tree, and behind that and the main force of that is the starseed movement, the Aurora network, and the knowings that they have, the thoughts that they project into this. That's where that comes in, and all of the connections that they have. That's why me and you and everyone listening to me now, we are so pivotal, every single one of us, in this movement. And that's why Mr. Tea Tree said, I can't do it without you. And that's true. That's the truth. And that can be through finance and people who have skill in that area, and people who know the markets, people who know the crypto, people who know the science fiction. And it's also the people that know the spiritual, the higher realms, the healing, the violet ray, the rainbow ray, the alchemical unification of humanity, ascension, all of it is connected. So Mr. Tea Tree knew all along this would happen. So that's what I'm told. He knew this was going to happen. He knew that the squares would be flipped. He played out his part like, oh gosh, what's happened? You know, he knew it would happen. And he was prepared for it. And although it looks like to the world there's no preparation going on, why hasn't something been done? When are they going to do anything? They've got all this, you know, evidence within the novel. It's a crime novel as well as a science fiction novel and a fantasy fiction novel. So they've got all this evidence. Why don't they go get the baddies? That's not the way of the strategy. That would not be the way. Again, it's too direct. It wouldn't work. It's not the way. And I know so many people just don't get this, but unless you can see the full multidimensional field and how it relates to this play out, you can't see the structure. It's a story. That's why I'm telling you a story. So Mr. Tea Tree knew all along this would happen, and he and the pixies with the white hats and the elves and the gnomes, they prepared for this. They prepared for the original squares to be flipped from red to blue, and they knew that this would happen again. The middle term, they knew that that would occur and that the squares would flip again. Now, I'm not told how, right? That I'm talking about the preparation. I'm not told how the preparation has occurred, because it's something no one knows. No one speaks about it anywhere. It's not public in order to keep it from the spies. It's very protected. But we might get some clues as to what it is tonight. So I'm talking about to the villagers tonight, meaning that Mr. Tea Tree the gnome is going to speak on the podium tonight. And we did get some clues, but those clues are not necessarily in speech. They're not necessarily in what is said or even what is not said. The clues are there in frequency and working out patterns and connecting dots through using the conscious and the subconscious mind together as one to work out what those things mean. So you need to do this individually. You know, if you're sitting there on your phone or on your laptop searching around for answers, well, that's great, because that adds to your overall knowledge and awareness and final conclusion within your own mind as to what is occurring. But the best place to go is within. It's always within. And that's why I do speak on social media, and I do have social media groups, because we go within together. It's not about me giving knowledge to people on my social media, and even now talking about the novel here. and telling you the latest chapters in the story, I'm not really just telling you the story. I'm not giving you knowledge because I know it and you don't. I'm telling you my perspective so we can work it out together, because this is a unity movement on every level, right down to that whole ruby, sapphire, chessboard game, right into our personal ascension and our personal evolution on a soul level as well. That's how connected it all is. So it's deeply personal and must be done collectively. It's a collective movement on the physical level, in 3D, and in the other realms together, as well as being incredibly individual. So I then said, by the time it's released to the public, as in the preparation that was made by the white capped pixies and Mr. Tea Tree and the other structures involved with that, and that includes well, there's the birds that fly over the village. There was some birds that flew over the village the other day. Gloria Love counted them. There were 17 of them, and so she just calls them the birds. Okay, so the birds, those 17 birds that flew over the village, is connected also within this white-capped pixies, Mr. Tea Tree, and the elements within that is a structure. And these birds, when they fly over the village, and Gloria Love counted 17 of them, are within that as well. So I can't see what they are or how it comes together or what the preparation is, because I've said why, because of the spies, the overlords, the people that pick up the book, that don't want to read the story just to relax and read a book. They want to read the story so that they can get ammunition for their own storytelling. So what I'm shown are images and insightful metaphors that could relate to multiple things, and my role is to deliver those to you in the pure form of the image, the pure form of the story, and for you to then take those as part of your own pieces of jigsaws to create your own jigsaw and see what they mean to you. Because this structure, this white capped pixie structure with Mr. Tea Tree, with all these birds and everything that's there, they want the Fae to know. They really do, because they see the Fae as quite, if you will, they see them as readers of the magazine called Patriotica. That's how they see them. That's how they refer to them. Patriotica readers. It's a magazine in the village. It's called Patriotica. So that's how they see the Fae, and they want the Fae to know. But they can't directly tell the Fae, because you've got all these overlords listening. Like, come on then, you know, give us the information. The people want to know. And they take that form as well. The overlords will take the form of someone who reads the Patriotica magazine, and they will pretend to be someone who reads the Patriotica magazine. And they'll say, oh, what does this mean? What does that? Surely if this happens, doesn't that mean this and that? And they infiltrate the movement of the people that read the Patriotica magazine. And they do that on social media, and they do that out in the places where there are lots of people that gather to listen to Mr. Tea Tree, and they disguise themselves as the opposite. So that's all part of the strategy. So there has to be a way to, for this structure, white-capped pixies, Mr. Tea Tree, and the birds flying around, there has to be a way to deliver to the people as much as they can, and hope that those Fae can work it out, and hope that there's got to be a few of them amongst them that can work it out. And, you know, they would actually say, we're sorry we have to do it like this. We really are. And one day they may well actually be able to say this for real. But as a channel, I don't have to just communicate with angelic forces or higher dimensional forces or consciousness structures that have lived and died and passed over. I can communicate with structures that are alive. And what that structure would say is, we are sorry we've had to do it this way. And that's where this whole sort of, you know, let's plan to stand on trust and move that plan within trust and trust that movement of that plan and that word, that phrase, you know, that's where it all came from. And it makes people cross because they're interpreting that as just do nothing, sit back, let us get on with it. We're the ones in the know. You can't know. Sorry, leave it to us. That is not what they're saying. I know I've said this before. They're saying, have faith in us. Do not lose your faith in us. And they have to hope that there'll be a few in the, whether it's people on keyboards in the village, whether it's storytellers, clairvoyants, psychics, whether it's, you know, people in the that are connected with Mrs. Military and who, you know, live in Mrs. Military's cottage, or whether it is people who are more invested in the coinage that's used as the currency within the village, or whether it's people in science, or whether it's people in media or journalism, or all of the different structures. I have to hope that people will be able to get this, because it simply isn't possible to just tell you. And I can't either. I'm being told the same thing from my information. We can tell you this, we can give you this, and hope that the individual works it out for themselves. And I have people getting mad with me as well, you know, on social media, like, oh, Magenta, you said this. Well, that can't be true because blah, blah, blah. And you get all this, you know, abuse and everything. And, you know, Mr. Tea Tree's had it. And I mean, the anger against the birds as well, the lack of understanding. And some of that was some of these Sapphire Blue team pretending to be people who read the magazine called Patriotica. Some of them were doing all of this as well. So anyway, the last thing I said was, by the time it's released to the public, as in the preparation, by the time that preparation is released to the public as to what it is and what it was, it will be too late for the overlords to do anything about it. So nothing can be released to the public, to the Fae, until it's too late for the overlords to do anything. And as long as there's a chance that the overlords can step in and use that intel to change their strategy in the chess game, then that information can't be delivered. And so that's really important to know. Okay, I then posted another post up on social media, and this was on the day that Mr. Tea Tree delivered his speech, but it was earlier in the day in the UK domain, so it was before he had delivered his speech. And this is what I wrote: another clue to show the villagers that this was known and planned the whole time. Well, intended anyway. So the plan can't be planned, because the plan involves two different structures. You've got the white-capped pixies and the vampire overlords in this fantasy fiction, dark fantasy novel. You have these characters. So the white-hatted pixies can't plan the plan, because they don't know what the vampire overlords are going to do. The vampire overlords can't plan the plan, because they don't know what the white-capped pixies are going to do. Now, they've got their ways of guessing, and the vampire overlords did have and possibly still do have access to the magic mirror, but the magic mirror in itself was creating fluctuations and was becoming problematic. So They may or may not be using it. It may be obsolete. It may not be working. And then you've got the white-hatted pixies that also have access to a similar kind of magic mirror type of thing, a quantum type of thing going on. So we've got multiple levels being looked at here on both sides. So that gives them both an advantage, but nothing is set in stone as a definite until it's manifested. So it's still a strategic, in the moment plan that is lived by the minute, by the second, by the day. It can't really be strategized too much in advance, but to a point it can. And I mean, you have got geniuses on both sides. This isn't just a case of, oh, well, you know, this side's a genius and they're really, you know, quite low intelligence, or vice versa. No, they're both deeply, deeply intelligent and extremely adept at what they do on both sides, even though it's sometimes made to look as though the vampire overlords are not adept and intelligent. I mean, when you look at the Bebop as a placeholder presentation, it makes you think, gosh, you know, they're not very savvy. It's another ploy. Yes, they are. Yes, they are on both sides. So that's another thing to say. So what I said was another clue to show the villagers. This was known and planned the whole time. So not planned, but intended. So the intention comes in from, and we're talking here on the white capped pixies side, the intention comes in from there as an intention for the plan, but it can't be fully planned because you are actually in a chess game with an opponent. So you can't plan how a chess game is going to go. You can plan your chess moves and what you might do if they make certain moves. You can even strategize as to what moves they might make on both sides. And that's exactly what is happening. Another clue to show the villagers this was known and planned the whole time was the repeated call for the Fae to go out and beat the drum and tick the banana box. They kept saying, beat the drums, beat the drums, beat the drums in the village. You must beat the drums. You must tick the banana box. And so a lot of, and especially the unaware readers of the magazine called Patriotica, a lot of them thought, right, you know, obviously we must do as we're being called to do. We must beat the drum. We must tick the banana box. But they thought it was because of creating a winner of the competition and somebody taking the top banana position. And so what people can't understand is if Mr. T and the White Cap Pixies knew in advance that the squares were going to be flipped, what was the point of beating the drums in the first place? Well, the point of beating the drums was so that the drum beats could be packaged up and put away in a vault for the future. Because nothing can be delivered unless they've got the actual drum beat. So that's why it's so important to beat your drum and to tick your banana box. Oh my goodness. Okay. Another clue to show the villagers this was known and planned the whole time was the repeated call for the Fae to go out and tick the banana box, beat the drums for their intended winner. They were told again and again to tick that box. You must tick that box. Beat the banana drum. You must beat the banana drum with your stick. This is actually sounding really bad. Sorry. The Patriotica readers of the Patriotica magazine, they listened and they did as they were told. This was not to ensure the banana trophy, but to prove the true numbers of the red squares when the time comes. Okay, so I hope I've got that out. The reason why the 17 birds started flying around the village was to show the savvy ones what was really going on without giving away the whole story to the overlord vampire spies, which had to involve misleading bird flying as well as accurate bird flying. So if you look up into the sky and you want to know what's going on with these birds, they're all flying in a certain direction. You think, oh, great. That's where they're going. And then all of a sudden, a few of the birds might fly over there and think, oh, hang on a minute, they're over there and over there. And then they might fly over there and you believe they're flying over there. And then you find out weeks later they didn't fly over there at all. This all had to be part of it as well. I have explained why. Okay. So the Fae were never left alone in this. They were never left alone in this. Yet their knowings and memories and ability to recognize code and pattern had to be relied upon somewhat, as there is absolutely no way the full presentation could be shown. So I've explained all that. It still cannot be so. It still cannot be shown. But the overlords have walked into the traps now. So I've explained that they're not traps from the overlord's perspective. They were pushed into a corner where they had a choice of A, B, or C, or sometimes only A or B. And they knew they were taking a chance, but they had to play one or the other, because if they didn't play A move or B move, then not playing at all would have been even worse for them. So they've just got to strategize. See, what's actually happening is a bit of stalemate. If you understand chess, it's not quite full stalemate. The white-capped pixies and Mr. Tea Tree and the birds are leading the overlord vampires around the chessboard. They're pushing them into moves, which is why people say the white-capped pixies are in control. That's not true. They're not in control. I keep saying that again and again, and yet I hear all the time from people all across the, you know, the truth area of the village and the psychic area of the village that the white-capped pixies are in control. They're not. But what they might be meaning by that is they are actually pushing them around the board. It's not through manipulation. They are actually walking in integrity. But because they've got so much control in areas, they're not in full control, but they have control in areas. Those areas are big parts of the plan, as in the top banana position. So that's a big area. And so it's like kind of leverage. And so they're like, well, we're going to do this, this, or this. And that forces the opponent, the vampire overlord, to think, oh, goodness, it's A or B. If we do nothing, it's not possible that we can do nothing. So we've got to choose between A or B. Or maybe what we could do is sort of twiddle A around or B around and maybe sort of try it like this. And they're trying to do something unexpected. And sometimes they do. And then over here, you've got the white-capped pixies like, oh, gosh, okay, let's do that. But overall, the ones that are calm and assured and confident are the white-capped pixies. And the ones that are kind of like being pushed around a little are the overlord vampires. So you will hear people say the white-capped pixies are in control, the overlord vampires are panicking. That is a very, very, very literal interpretation of what is potentially true. But if you say it like that, if you say the white-capped pixies are in control and the overlord vampires are panicking, then because that's so highly exaggerated, it allows those that do not go along with that to discredit the whole thing, because they can say, you keep on saying that the white-capped pixies are in control. Well, if they were in control, this wouldn't happen and that wouldn't happen. And you keep saying that the overlord vampires are panicking, but if they were panicking, they wouldn't be able to do this, this, or this. That's because to say the white-capped pixies are in control and the overlord vampires are panicking is an extreme exaggeration of the fact that the white-capped pixies are calm, collected, and assured and confident, and so they should be, because they need that magically, as well as keeping a cool head in order to move through the strategy and the plan. And the overlord vampires are sort of having their feathers ruffled, even though they have training in staying calm. So it isn't quite like what's being said, and that's misleading. And it allows the overlords to pretend to be the readers of the Patriotica magazine and discredit the Patriotica magazine reading community. And it allows real Patriotica magazine readers to also give up on this and to discredit it as complete nonsense. So you can understand why, because it's an exaggeration, but it has its seeds in truth, because that is the kind of play out. But it's not quite what's being said. And it's not easy to describe these nuances. There are only a certain amount of words in the English language. It's not easy to describe these nuances. And it's not easy to describe these nuances when you're telling a fantasy fiction story either. So it still cannot be so, as in the full presentation still cannot be shown. However, the overlords have walked into the traps now, and they have since the last competition. They've walked into the traps, and that was a big trap, but the overlords didn't really have any choice, because if they hadn't, then there would have been a ruby tsunami. That's what would have occurred. And that ruby tsunami would have been just end game in any way, shape or form in getting that top banana position in the Americano USville domain. So they had to walk into the trap. So what they're trying to do is mitigate the trap damage and make it not a trap, make it work for them. And so they've got other stuff going on, and that involves the legals and the birds of justice and all that. So, you know, we've still got a ways to go yet. So although the overlords have walked into the traps, care is still needed, because they're going to try to mitigate the trap. They're going to try and twist it and distort it and change it and deflect and reflect and do all the strategies. So this is not a case of we got them and they're going down. That again is an exaggeration of a true foundation. It is a true foundation, but it has to play out, and that takes time. And many people just aren't able to kind of get it. They just can't seem to see it and understand it. And that causes such confusion and anger in those people. And then, of course, you've got these vampire overlords pretending to be Patriotica magazine readers, and that adds fuel to the fire. Okay, so the overlords have walked into the traps now, but even so, care is still needed. Okay. Care is still needed. It is. Quite understandable also why the truth fairies got angry. So the truth fairies are like sort of truther fairies, if you know what I mean. They live in a fairy truther community. It's understandable why the truth fairies got angry, and they called, this is nonsense, this isn't true, this is deliberate lies on the whole thing. If you can't see pattern and you can't see the folding universe, the fractality of everything, if you can't see that, then you can't see it. And when you are told about it, it will appear like lies, because you can be told something that isn't computing in your ability to understand. If it's not computing to you, especially if the words used are so literal, like the white cat pixies are in control, the overlord vampires are panicking, we got them, they're going down, and that's it. That sounds like nonsense to someone who isn't seeing the patterns. So what I'm trying to do here is present the patterns through story to allow you to see if, I mean, most of the people watching this will see these patterns anyway, but some of you are seeing some patterns and not quite connecting the dots of the patterns together to see deeper into the fractality. So I hope my story assists you to see deeper into the fractality of the novel and of the whole fiction of it in and of itself. So the cups of tea that the Fae will be drinking tonight, so they'll be drinking cups of tea when Mr. Tea Tree talks on his podium. The cups of tea that the Fae will be drinking tonight are pivotal and will hold patterns as well as words. So this was posted before Mr. Tea Tree spoke to the Fae. So I was telling people in advance, before they go and listen to Mr. Tea Tree, there will be patterns as well as words, as in, don't just look at the words, look at the patterns, feel the frequency, understand what is being said, what is not being said, and what is being said and not being said together as one. Look at the gestures, the movements. If you can't feel empathy and see patterns behind structures, then you can still understand that there's a deeper movement. And some people get so cross with this. They say things like, why are we talking about what is not being said? Why are we talking about what's going on behind the scenes? That's pointless. But the reason why it's not pointless is because that's where the truth is. It's multi-leveled. And that's the situation. And if you don't like that, if you think that sounds like lies or misinformation, or you know, it's the direction to read the wrong story, then that book, that novel, isn't for you, and you would need to go read a different novel until maybe you come back to that novel in the future when you feel ready to read it. I mean, it's your choice at the end of the day what novel you read. So this is a giant jigsaw puzzle, and it will all come together, and it will all come together. It's going to take time. That is not said to make people frustrated, because if you are sat there thinking, how much longer is this going to take? I've been waiting so long. Then all you are going to manifest for yourself is more of the same. You're just going to be sitting there waiting, and it's going to string itself out without conclusion, because you are manifesting that for yourself. The way to actually find the truth is to see that everything is happening now. In your memory of the life you lived, you know the play out, because you can take the perspective of the individual who has lived this life and look back through that memory stream and see it and move yourself into that 0 point and know that it's all happening now. Your perspective will be very, very different when you take that stance. You're not waiting for anything. Nothing is taking ages. Nothing is taking a long time. It's all there in front of you now. It's been given to you already. That is the stance you take in order to create it. When you are there, and when enough of us at critical mass are there, we will create that to be given to us as the culmination of the story. And that is the play out. That's where we need to be at critical mass level. That is what is meant by holding the charge, holding the flame, holding the beacon, flying the flag for. These are all holding space. These are all that which the starseed beings are doing for this play out. Each one of them in their own way are holding space for that, which is why the overlord vampires are floundering, because their dark magic is no match for the light. That's why it's happening this way. That's why it's tied up with our spirituality and our ascension. So this is a giant jigsaw puzzle, and it will all come together. Gloria saw the flipped blue squares eventually bundled up into piles of red squares with white squares on top. They all changed back to the organic original red. So yes, that is going to happen. And we stand in our knowing of that. It's there now. It's already happened. It's important to take that view, to hold that energy as a collective. We are magical workers. We are magical workers, and we are working magic, standing there as the spiritual, magical backup to those on the ground, the white-capped pixies and Mr. Tea Tree and the birds, and all of the structure that holds. We are part of that. We are the birds as well, in our own individual ways. We are the readers of the Patriotica magazines. We are the starseeds. We are the fae. We are the villagers. A good story is always, always interactive. And that's what this novel is about. It is an interactive novel. Gloria saw the flipped blue squares eventually bundled up into piles with white squares on top. They all changed back to the organic original red. This has already been written into the story. It's just that you have not read those pages yet, but you will. Whatever happens, this story will be read. Read as in R-E-A-D and read as in R-E-D. So that is what is happening. And I posted that prior to Mr. Tea Tree talking to the Fae. Oh yes, I posted one more post as well prior to Mr. Tea Tree talking to the Fae. And I wrote, so in the village, Mr. Tea Tree is getting ready to talk to the Fae. The overlords clearly don't want this to happen, as they've just released information regarding Perua Rintintin, who is an elf, who is a elf hybrid vampire. Perua Rintintin's domain, they've been throwing stones at a couple of fairies from the fake United domain, which obviously includes USville, meaning lots of domains could get involved in the stone throwing. Are they trying to drown out Tea Tree's chirp with louder birds? Patience, observation, neutrality. Hold the line, warrior Fae. So Mr. Tea Tree's getting ready to talk to the Fae. The overlords obviously don't want this to happen. Now, do they not want him to talk to the Fae at all? Or were they worried about what he was going to say to the Fae? I think it's both of that. They couldn't stop Mr. Tea Tree talking to the Fae, but they were obviously concerned about what Mr. Tea Tree might say. That's all part of the strategizing coming from the white-capped pixie side, making a big thing about the talk. So that gets the vampires and the overlords thinking, oh, what's he going to say? So they brought Perua Rintintin's domain into it, saying that some stones had been thrown at a couple of fairies from the fake United domain. So this is a united structure involving many domains. And the reason why it's a fake united domain is it's not united at all. It is a structure that's been created by the overlord vampires to look like it's united, but really it's a control structure. So what the situation is if you throw stones to any domain that's in the fake united domain, then the whole fake united domain can actually take that as the fact that you've thrown stones against them, so they can all start throwing stones back. So are they trying to drown out Tea Tree's chirp with the louder birds, meaning when it comes to something like media, are they trying to flood and saturate that media presentation with the stone throwing in order to push down the significance of the Tea Tree talking to the Fae? Or were they beginning to present a narrative that if Tea Tree did say something that needed drowning out, then they could go with that narrative and saturate the media? I think it's all somewhere in that realm. And that's why I said patience, observation, neutrality, which come from the 9, of course. Hold the line, warrior Fae. And of course, that narrative sort of didn't play out, and it turned out that it was actually, well, the narrative presented that it was actually a different domain throwing stones, and it wasn't Perua Rintintin's domain. Were any stones actually thrown at all? Oh, I'll leave that to you to decide when you read the book yourself. But anyway, I stayed up in the United Kingdom and read the novel, and I was up till 3:30 reading the novel. And in the novel, Gloria Love stayed up and listened to Mr. Tea Tree talk on the podium. And so this is what I said after the next day, after reading the novel. And hearing about Gloria listening to Mr. Tea Tree. So this is what I said the next morning. Wonderful speech tonight from the leader of our movement of light and truth. We've always been on the trajectory for truth, freedom, unity, and love, but that trajectory has been hidden from so many who could not look beyond the veil. Now we are back on that trajectory within physical manifestation. This will, as I have always said, play out in the American domain, the Americana domain, USville, with the world watching. Each domain in the village adding their unique energetic into the pot. That is Operation Freedom Earth. So Operation Freedom Earth is the narrative within Operation Freedom Village and Operation Freedom Fae. And that is also known as Operation Freedom Gaia. As the great man just said, we are all needed to do our part. Literally the best news ever. Freedom and Ascension timeline sealed as prophesied. Good night, light warriors. Enjoy this glorious moment. Much more to come. Sweet dreams. So Gloria said this after watching Mr. Tea Tree before she went to sleep at 3:30 in the morning. It's a bit late, isn't it? Okay, next day. There were so many posts for me to look at. I mean, I haven't been able to catch up with them even now, so I've missed loads. I believe there were some little trolls in the village, and I do have some guardians working on that, and some of the really nasty troll stuff I didn't even see, which is good. But, you know, expected. I must admit I was a bit surprised at, I mean, I'm not surprised at trolls coming in. That's the people who are readers of the Patriotica and are pretending to be readers of the Patriotica magazine. I was expecting those who are asleep in the village not to understand why Mr. Tea Tree was allowed to speak in the first place. I mean, I know people in the UK domain who are saying things like, how come he's allowed to even speak? You know, just don't. And I'm like, well, you can't stop someone from talking. I mean, if the media, if the little fairies with the cameras want to go and listen to him and film him, that's up to them. It's independent domain, independent structure. So they don't understand that. Anyway, I woke to tons of posts, and I will say the vast majority, good 90%, were people completely understanding and very supportive and totally understanding of supportive of Mr. Tea Tree, I mean, and his announcement that he is going to enter the banana competition in the village. So I'm going to go and have a look at some of the questions, because I did have a lot of questions come in, and I'm going to look through some. There's loads and loads. I can't really look at all of them, but these are some, and these are some that I actually chose to respond to on social media. So I'll let you know the question and my response. Okay, first one, Magenta. I don't understand what the big announcement was. We knew he would run. I was hoping he would say things about what is going on now. I cannot understand why you think this is so amazing. I'm fed up with optics, and I'm fed up with waiting. It's just more of the same. My reply: if you feel this way, then you have not been paying attention. I could not have done more over the last couple of years to present the picture to you of how things are. It must be done like this. If you do not understand why, then all I can say to you is cultivate the trust and the silence of the spiritual warrior. Go within and allow your true self to show you what is happening. So I think I've kind of explained this really by going through the story about people fed up with waiting, what happens when you're in that place, what are you manifesting for yourself when you're in that place. But I've also explained why people would feel this way by the amount of information regarding the white-capped pixies are in control, the overlord vampires are panicking. That picture that's being presented is seen as just a continued, more of the same narrative with nothing being done. So you can understand why people are thinking that way, but as I have explained, they're not seeing the quantum structure, they're not seeing the way this is playing out, the nuances, everything behind the scenes doesn't mean what's going on behind the cameras necessarily. It means what's going on energetically in the pre-matter field, in the thought structures of everyone involved. So it is a complex structure. I have spoken about this before. So I think I've kind of explained that. Go within and allow your true self to show you what is happening, because that is where to find the truth. It's to go within. If you have been following the spiritual disciplines, and if you already have those spiritual disciplines in place, as many of you do, everything you're hearing me saying now is just going to be either a different perspective, a slightly different perspective, a completely resonating perspective, or confirmation. So it might be something new for you to take away. It might be a confirmation of everything you already know. But going within is the way to find the truth. It's always that for everything. Okay, so someone posted here, the Overlord vampires are over. It's always been this way. No, sorry, that was me that wrote that. Is it? Yeah. Yes, that was me that wrote that. Yeah. Okay, I haven't made that clear that that was not a question. The Overlord vampires are over. It has always been this way, but now we will see manifestation of it, but it's going to look like the opposite for a while. There are multiple layers to this. So what I'm actually saying here is they're over from the perspective of seeing the play out, seeing the inevitability of the play out, and seeing the singularity, as every single timeline has the same eventuality. It doesn't mean they are over as in right now in the third dimension. It is a statement that is truthful when it comes to true time outside of linear time. So if somebody misinterprets and said, well, Magenta says, you know, the vampire overlords are over, that's not true in the physical realm. That's not true in the third dimensional realm. They're still there. As I've said, there's lots to be played out, but there is an inevitability here. There's this mini one going on in the Aria zones, which is critical and crucial, but there's an overall singularity, and it's the Great Awakening is the core of that singularity in this novel and in this series of novels. Ultimately, Mr. Tea Tree running for the banana competition is literally huge. The way he announced that he's running for the banana competition is huge, and we should be celebrating. He will go into that big pond full of dirty, swampy water, and he's going to take the toxicity out of it. There are some creatures within this swamp in the village that need to be taken out. And there's also a plug at the bottom of this big, dirty water. And when he pulls the plug out, then that water will drain out. So that is what he's going to do, as promised. He is also going to flush out the viper's nests. So there's lots of snakes. They have little nests in the village. They live in the jungle. They live in the forest. And he will go in there and he will remove those viper's nests. He is going to do this. Not only will he take back the Americano-USville domain, but we together will take back the village. We will take back our planet. Is what we would say if this was happening in real life. Obviously, this is a story, so we'll take back our village. And my final word was, his speech last night was magic. That's not a metaphor. What I meant by that was the act itself of standing on the podium and speaking is a magical act of manifestation in and of itself. The words spoken is a magical act of manifestation in and of itself, because the action of standing on the podium and speaking the words is taking action and grounding down that which you are manifesting as your desired outcome for that timeline. So the act itself grounds that down. So what that's actually done is, prior to that, we have a pre-matter template, a potential, a potential, a potential, a potential for top banana, a potential for the return of top banana, a potential for the red squares to be delivered and the moving into top banana. They're potentials, and they're sitting there and they're being projected through the thoughts, the emotions of the white-cap pixie structure, the birds, the star seeds, the light levels. It's a projection. But then when you move into the standing on the podium and you deliver the words, I will do this, I am going to do that, we will do this, you are magically manifesting. You are a master of the matrix, a master of manifestation. You are a magician in that moment, and everyone who catches that and holds that within as yes, yes, we are going to do that. This is amazing. You join together in telepathic union with that magician and you add weight to that manifestation. His speech last night was magic. That's not a metaphor. So what this does is draws down all the pre-matter and brings it into a trajectory. It puts Mr. Tea Tree back onto a trajectory. Literally, as he's saying, I am going to run for top banana in this position, in this competition. And energetically, I am focused there. That is my goal. That is where I'm going to go. These are the things I'm going to do. And all the magical star seeds and those that hold that magical frequency and the ability to manifest collectively draw themselves into that and see that singularity as well and lend their energy to this focus. And that is what happened. That is what happened. And no matter what you can say about what was said, what was not said, what did this mean, what did that mean, that's all great. It's all part of it. But ultimately, this was a magical manifestation from the true perspective, from the higher dimensional perspective. And everyone out there who wants this singularity, who wants the removal of the dark structure and the moving into true freedom, everyone who wants that, that's sitting there and saying, yeah, but what about this and what about that? And I was so disappointed because he didn't say this, this or this. He only said that, and that. And it wasn't really what I wanted. And it was a nothing burger and it was this, that and the other. You are not linking with that telepathic union and that trajectory. You are not standing up in your power and holding the magic that you came here to hold. You are not fulfilling your mission. You want this mission, yet you are telling the universe that you don't want it. Tell the universe that you do want it. And you do that by holding the knowing in your heart that this will be as it has been said. That is what happened, and that is our role in this particular journey. And anyone out there who is supportive of Mr. T and what he's doing, who's supportive of this structure, the white-capped pixies and the birds, who knows the singularity and the eventual play out, and who understands spirituality and magic, every one of you who do see that and are holding gratitude in your hearts, thankfulness, are celebrating because that trajectory is back. You are crucial because you are holding the frequency for that to manifest physically. And that's the reason I'm telling you this story today. So I hope you can see how crucial this is, how this is intertwined with our spirituality, our evolution and our ascension. I hope you can see that, because I have to be honest, I was quite surprised to see these kinds of comments from awake individuals, because to me it was just so clear, the magic, the power, the spell casting of this move was profound, and I knew it was coming. And I have to be honest, I did not expect it to come this soon. So we've got people out there saying, we're waiting. It's taken so long. Nothing's happening. Nothing really happened. And there's me. I'm being taught to cultivate stamina and temperance for the long haul. And that's what I have done. I have listened to the 9, and I have thought, right, I need to find stamina for the long haul. I mustn't sit here thinking this is over next week, this is over next month. And whenever I receive information that it's going down in 2 months, this will be over, at the end of the year this will be over, by such and such, this is done, dusted, they're all out, they're over here, they've been taken to this island or locked in that dungeon or whatever, I ignore those things, whether there's any truth there or not, because I have been told by my guidance system, the White-Winged Collective Consciousness of 9, to cultivate stamina. So I am finding that stamina to take me through. And temperance, which is that calm, focused, feeling very akin to patience, as in the 0 point. So for me, to actually hear these words and see this magical act that takes us back to the trajectory of the light holding the most important piece on the chessboard, which is the pivotal first domino that takes down all the other dominoes and removes that dark structure. For me to have seen that manifestation event of magic take place after only 2 years, it's a really nice surprise for me, because I was cultivating stamina for the long haul. I didn't think I would be hearing this in 2022. I really didn't. It's a surprise to me, other than I got this dream on the 17th of July 4 months ago about Mr. Tea Tree being, you know, under the world's spotlight. That's the only inkling I had that this might possibly be something. And I still didn't realize it would be a running for top banana. I honestly thought that might come later. I also still feel that it isn't exactly what's being said. It's definitely a trajectory, but it's not necessarily a trajectory to top banana in the particular year that has been spoken of. It's a trajectory to the singularity. It's a trajectory to all the things that will be done, the magical manifestations that were put out, which is the going into that dirty water and pulling that plug. That's what that is. Okay, so more questions. Magenta, would it be fair to say that we're in the next stage of the final chess game now, as the number after 44 and prior to 46 alluded to it last night when he said, from this point on, we are coming back. The concluding phases, to my mind, are the flip of the mainstream, which will disclose the truth of that little jar that sits on the shelf with skull and crossbones on it, like, don't drink this, oh my goodness, do not drink this, administered, and finally the governments within the village, the fictional governments, will fall. My reply was pretty much yes, but multi-layered. So what I mean by that is that's a sort of template, but there's so much in between, and there are so many other things, there are so many backstories, and it's impossible really for me to answer that question on a forum. So whoever asked that question, I hope that question's now been answered by listening to me talking about the novel here in this video, because I will have explained about the nuances and the multi-layered subplots and sub-stories within the overall story. So would it be fair to say we're in the next stage of the final chess game? Yes, without a doubt, as the number above 44 alluded to it when he said, from this point on, we are coming back. Absolutely. That is what is meant by the timeline has. It's not that the timeline has changed. People are saying the timeline has changed. You could say that. That's a metaphor. What I would say is that the energy was pre-matter and it's now been brought into manifestation. trajectory. So it's gone from thought and potential as something that is highly likely to manifest into an actual trajectory to a physical manifestation. It's brought the timeline into reality. So yes, we're in the next stage because of that. So was Mr. Tea Tree talking to the Fae pivotal in creating a physical, real timeline? Yes, absolutely. The concluding phases to my mind are the flip of the mainstream. So I guess what the questioner is meaning by that is the mainstream fairies and elves in the village flipping. So starting to present from dark to light. Yes, but that is, in my opinion, quite literal of how it will go. I feel that that is more of a coming forward of genuine mainstream light in the village, and the darker overlord structures within the reporters having to speak about things that they wouldn't normally speak about. So it's not really what I would say a flip. It's more, it's not a flip, it's more of a, what's the word? Resignation in having to report what they don't want to report, but it's a strategy and it's all part of the whole thing, so they have to. And this plays out in so many different ways. However, the actual reporting that's going on that is genuine is getting brighter and brighter and brighter, as in more people are switching over and watching that particular fairy channel. So they're not going to be wanting to watch those channels. They're going to start. So that's the flip. The flip is with the people, the viewers, not necessarily within the reporters. That's more of a resignation, because there is no real sort of flip as in a quick movement from one to another, but it's metaphor. We're discussing metaphor really, and it's a perfectly fine word to say, flip. Which will disclose the truth of the little jar with the skull and crossbones on that sits on the shelf in the village apothecary. So when I said yes, but multi-layered, the reason why it's multi-layered is because that particular narrative holds within it the true awakening and the false awakening. If you want to know about the false awakening, go watch my video, The False Awakening. So that is a control of that particular narrative. So that narrative was an inevitability, so it can't be prevented. So therefore, the only thing they can do is control that inevitability. So that's got within it the truth, the true awakening, the false awakening. That's the truth of the little bottle with the skull and crossbones on it. It sits next to 2 apples, and there's a little bottle of juice next to it. So the truth about that is coming in on both of those threads, true and false awakening, true awakening. Now, if the overlord vampires were to truly hold the top banana position with all that it comes with, not this emasculated version of it, then the false awakening would just be the main awakening. The true awakening wouldn't really be able to get in, because, and I can't really tell you why. I can just see that that's the pattern. But because they don't hold a true top banana position, they hold an emasculated top banana position with all this structure and substance and good stuff like taken away with the original top banana. The true awakening will get in with the false. It's not going to stop the false awakening, but the true awakening will seep in. If you want to know more about what I'm talking about regarding false awakening, go watch the video False Awakening on my channel. So that's why I said multi-layered. And finally, the ruling structure within the village will fall. And that really is explained in when I said about Mr. Tea Tree going into the big pond of dirty water and pulling the plug and just you know, draining that dirty water away like you would, you know, empty a bathtub. So yes, is the answer to that, really, as a foundation. The only bit I needed to really add in was the mainstream isn't a flip, it's slightly different, and the disclosure of the bottle of the skull and crossbones sitting next to apples and juice is mixed with False Awakening. So see how that plays out. Multiple timelines as to how this could go. Very, very much 2023 for that one, and I've always seen that. I'll be so surprised if that comes out in any big way prior to 2023. I know it's already seeping out, but I'm talking about reaching the sleeping fairies. I believe that the reaching of the sleeping fairies and the resulting shockwaves of that and the backlash, and hopefully there will be some kind of cushioning in place so that we do not go into a big shockwave and give the Dark Overlords what they want. We would like to have sort of a shockwave and a cushioning for that, which is a system of help, and that's already being put into place all over the world at the moment that I can see. I'm not sure how that will come in, but it will in divine timing. So I feel that's 2023. Okay, next question or comment rather. I love you, Magenta, but I'm not getting my hopes up for any swampy draining or taking back the Americano domain. The competition needs to be a top issue, and reforming the way the people beat the drums and the way that they tick the boxes must be a top issue. Mr. Tea Tree did cover this in his talk. He did speak about pieces of paper. He talked about counting on the same day rather than waiting for a week or 2 weeks. He talked about competition night, not competition week. The actual flipping of the squares is so bad, it's really hard to see how we can possibly win, but let's see what happens. So I'm going to remain neutral for now, and I'm going to be an observer rather than being attached to any specific outcome. But I will be rooting for the good guys as always. Great comment and really, really wise. So my reply is never be attached to an outcome, but remain neutral. And by doing that, that will allow you to see the most probable outcome as you operate from 0 point. So that's all absolutely accurate, and that's the way to play this. And what I said was, don't get your hopes up, but allow yourself to celebrate through your knowing. So getting your hopes up is very different to celebration through knowing. Getting your hopes up is like, oh, please, please, oh my goodness, please let this happen. Oh, it's got to happen, it's got to happen. And when it doesn't, it's like, oh, I'm so disappointed. I'm so let down. I'm so angry. Not again. Never will I invest my emotions again in that getting my hopes up. So that's all coming from trauma and pain and hope, which can be quite detrimental, especially if that hope is born from a pattern that you didn't see, a plan you couldn't understand, and information that was false. Okay, celebration through knowing is very different. That is like, wow, this is absolutely amazing. We are on this trajectory. Mr. Tea Tree just said this, this, and this. He is a magician. He's created magic. He has brought that timeline into the story for us. And I feel amazing. I'm going to celebrate. I feel fantastic. That's not hopeful. That's not getting your hopes up. That's euphoria and bliss and feeling great. That's positivity. But you remain neutral within that, so that if that does not occur, which is extremely unlikely, but it could play out in a different way, there's lots to happen, the inevitability and the singularity is going to play out. And that's beautiful, because it's all of this. How can you not be in bliss and euphoria when you know it's going to happen? Because this is the mission that you came here to live. You're doing your job, you're living your mission, and you've succeeded, because there it is. You can see it. So that's very, very different from getting your hopes up. That is celebration through knowing. So even if that particular timeline you're seeing didn't manifest in the way you thought, you're not going to have your hopes dashed, because that euphoria is still there, because you know this is an inevitability and it will manifest in some other way, which is exactly how I have taken this from the last 2 years. Because I have to admit, when Mr. Tea Tree didn't win the top banana competition, the first one, you know, the one in the time period near chapter 2020, that one, I can't lie and say that I didn't feel some disappointment. I did. And a lot of that was shock in a way, because I'd never thought about squares being flipped. Yes, I was told the night before. I only really had 1 day's notice to actually see it happen. And I could see it happening when it happened, when the you know, the little pixies counting, they stopped counting. I knew it was that. And yes, that wasn't nice. And I'm sure I tuned in on everybody else as well. It was horrible. And I don't think that was really getting hopes up and having hopes dashed. That was seeing such an inevitability, such a powerful manifestation and vision, and it not happening. And so it was like, what? I saw it. You know, I saw it. I mean, I saw it in the fields. And I know when I see things that clearly that they are going to play out. It's happened since I was born. So to have people, when I had lots of people like, oh, you said this, Magenta, I'll never listen to you again because you said this was going to happen and it didn't. I saw that. And I've never stopped seeing it, even when Mr. Tea Tree didn't win. After my initial feelings of disappointment and having to integrate those, which I guess took, I don't know, maybe a few days at most, I knew that that vision was still there. I knew that it would come back to that timeline at some point. And then when Mr. Tea Tree left and said his goodbyes and left the village, I knew he'd be back. And it was sad to see him leave, and it was sad to go through such a long time without hearing from him. He didn't make any phone calls to any of the pixies in the village. He didn't write any letters. He didn't walk around the village or come back and visit. He was kind of gone, and that was really difficult. But I knew he'd be back. I never doubted for a second. And I've always seen that vision of the top banana, always in some form, whether it's the way we think it is or whether there is a restructuring and it's a new one. It's always been that. I've never faltered in that vision. If you go back and see previous videos I have done, you will see that I've said the same thing the whole time. I've seen this same thing the whole time. So for me, the discussion, the talk, Mr. Tea Tree talking on the podium, has brought us back to that same vision that I always saw. And it's the same one. I just saw it too early. You know, and I thought it would be in chapter 2020. It's not. It's going to be in a later chapter. But we're back on the trajectory. And if that particular trajectory shifts and moves, and because we're going to get moves and counter moves coming in from the overlord vampires, they're going to do everything they can. Mr. Tea Tree's on the podium heading for a trajectory, and it's the complete opposite trajectory that they want. They will do everything on every level to prevent this trajectory. You just watch. It'll be, well, I mean, I say it was bad enough before that it could even be, the attempts could even be more full on than they were before. They will do everything to stop this. But it's an inevitability, not necessarily Mr. Tea Tree becoming top banana. That's not necessarily a inevitability. The inevitability is Tea Tree becoming top banana in some form that matches that particular singularity. And it might not be what we think it is. It might manifest in a different way, but it will still match the singularity. It will still match the pattern in some form. And that's not something I can really explain until it happens, but that's what's there. Going back to the Aria zones and the Lady of the Lake, that is actually her the inevitability being the triggering to the exposure of the original red squares is absolutely, that's how it's going to be. It's not something similar that will match. That is it. But with Mr. Tea Tree becoming top banana, and now we're back on that trajectory, very, very, very closely and in direct, clear alignment. And I tell you what, it's clearer than it was before. There were so many obstacles. There was so much static in the pathway. It's gone. Now, what's that? What is that static? Well, I'll tell you what it is. It is the higher vibrational state of humanity and the planet within the village, within the novel. We have had the very powerful Lion's Gate in August, followed by the partial solar eclipse, a very powerful total lunar eclipse, and a really, really strong 11/11 right on the back of that, in that little close moving sort of structure, in that follow on. We have this talk by Mr. Tea Tree, and the clarity into the trajectory is because of that higher vibrational state of all of these things. And the land, see my video about Stargate England, that explains all of this. That energy is now conducive for manifestation, especially collective manifestation. So if you are able to get into that celebratory state and see that trajectory that I've explained to you, then you are utilizing that higher dimensional energy for manifestation collectively, and you will reap the benefits of that higher dimensional energy and the collective manifestation on an individual level as well. This is planetary, global, and it is galactic. It is right the way up. That's how deeply this is affected. But that doesn't mean that Mr. Tea Tree becomes top banana in the year that's been mentioned, with a 4 on the end of it, in exactly the way that's been done before. It could. And people ask about the square flipping. And, you know, that's a massive block. Well, yes, it is, but not with the Lady of the Lake holding the key to the domino flipping into the reveal of the true red squares. That's why I say the Lady of the Lake holds the hilt of Excalibur. When the Lady of the Lake brings her hand out of the lake, she's holding Excalibur. That's the indigo revolution and the sword of truth. And that's why she's the Lady of the Lake, and she really is the Lady of the Lake. If you actually look at the energetic signature that has been given to the Lady of the Lake, as in that which is named of her, that's the lake. And that is the lake that the Lady of the Lake draws upward the sword that is Excalibur, which is truth. So that is the stance there. That's why it's a singularity. It's an inevitability in and of itself, because this is a missioned act. The Lady of the Lake was born to raise Excalibur. It was inevitable. So therefore, any talk about flipping of the squares is a moot point. It's not a moot point now, because the Lady of the Lake hasn't started doing her thing. But once she starts doing her thing with Excalibur, it becomes a moot point. And everything does fall apart then for that structure. This is the play out. This is what fits the energy right now. That's what fits. So my reply: never be attached to an outcome, but remaining neutral will allow you to see the most probable outcome so you're not attached to an outcome, but you see the most probable one. You observe it, you see it. You're not attached to it. You're not attached to it. It's not a case of, oh my goodness, if this doesn't, I mean, I see, you know, Mr. Tea Tree being top banana. I can see it. I've always seen it, but I'm not attached to it. And if it doesn't happen, I'm not going to be, oh no, I'm so disappointed it didn't happen. I was a little bit last time, but it still wasn't an attachment. It was a really strong belief, because I did not account for time for that manifestation to occur. That was my interpretation that was the issue, not the vision. I interpreted that vision as being in chapter 2020, in chapter 2020. That was my interpretation prior to that particular competition. That's my interpretation. It was too literal, but the vision itself was correct, and I always knew that. Always knew that. So I see that. I see it, and it's always been there. So remaining in 0 point allows you to see the most probable outcome and the singularity. Because when you operate from 0 point, that's creation itself. You can see everything around you. You can see it. And as you see it, you manifest it. This is the thing. Seeing is manifesting when it's done from 0 point. And Mr. Tea Tree did that in his speech. He might not understand the intellectual or scientific or spiritual perspectives of 0 point, but he was in 0 point. His energy was in 0 point. And every word he spoke was a magical act because of that. Speaking, seeing, and speaking. As you speak, you spell, because you're using words that need to be spelled in order to understand what they are. And that's the spell. That is the spelling. The spell is the spelling. The spell is the magic. That's what Tea Tree did. So don't get your hopes up, but allow yourself to celebrate through your knowing. And then I went on to say, big ripples to come in the naughty square flipping. And Mr. Tea Tree can't let that part of the plan out, but watch the Lady of the Lake. So I do have a lot more questions to get through, but I think I've been talking for quite a long time. So I will end this particular presentation here, and I will come back and go through the other questions as well, because I think that they're really, they're all really significant. But I do think I've given you a really good picture of the energetics that I see, and how I see this playing out, and the significance of Mr. Tea Tree's address to the village. So remember, this is a fictional novel. We are talking about a fictional novel that is a merge or a blend of urban fantasy, dark fantasy. There is a small amount of horror in there as well. There's crime. There's a love story in there, and it's very much spiritual fiction, I guess. That's the kind of writing that this is, because it's a journey of the hero's quest as he or she moves from someone who's at the beginning of a journey of knowledge and learning to the culmination of that. And within that, our protagonist, whoever you think the protagonist may be within the story, it's you, of course, the protagonist saves the world. And that's not to be taken literally, but neither is it really a metaphor in its fullest sense, because it is actually the truth. So I hope you're enjoying the novel so far, the way the story's going, and I will be back with more analysis of the chapters yet to come. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll speak to you all again soon. Bye.